in which Pettiness saved everything by Lurking Dragon, in which Endeavor's first day of school instructions were just a little more specific. Shoto is just a little more petty, and Kaminari is just a little more nosy. Or Shoto was told specifically not to make friends. Naturally, he became a social butterfly. Now, remember this, Shoto. Shoto listens reluctantly. If he could get away with it, he'd tune Endeavor out. But as it is, that's a flame risk he doesn't need on the first day of school. You're going to UA to surpass All Might, not to make friends. Your own strength is what matters in the end. Don't bother making any friends. They'll just distract you from your goal. Your goal, Shoto thinks absently. As he leaves the house, though, the same thought process that led him to swear off his fire is picking apart Endeavor's parting words. He doesn't want me to make friends. Shoto slides into the car that will take him to UA. Therefore, to act counter to his wishes and to spite him, the obvious solution is to become a social butterfly. It can't be that hard, right? In the time that it takes to get from the front gates of the Todoroki mansion to the front gates of UA, Shoto has looked up at least 15 listicles and videos on how to make friends. Almost all of them advise being yourself. The problem here is that Shoto is positive that himself is a little traumatized and a lot to handle. Not good friend material. But it's to spite Endeavor, and spite is the driving force behind his goals. He can do it. Shoto gets out and walks into UA. He's a little early, but not the first one here. He finds his seat and puts the bag on the seat, then goes to introduce himself to the other people. Yaya Rozumomo he knows from the recommendation test, but he didn't make a very good impression, he thinks. He bows to the familiar-looking boy with the dark blue hair. Hello, I am Todoroki Shoto. It's good to meet you. Maybe a little formal, but it's the formula that listicle number 7 said made for a good introduction. The other boy bows back immediately. Hello, Todoroki. I am Ida Tenya, and it's good to meet you. Ah, that's why he looks familiar. Being the prize son of the number 2 hero means a lot of being dragged around to parties and shown off. The Ida family mansion is the least interesting with all the automation and robots. Shoto stays standing and greets everyone who comes in, along with Yayorozu and Ida. Making friends is exhausting, but it'll be worth it to see the look on Endeavor's face. 2 of his new classmates catch his interest. Shinzo Hitoshi, the tired purple boy who, upon inquiry, has a brainwashing quirk he used to make a pervert beat up robots for him in the heroics exam, just kind of grins at Shoto and then tries to take a nap on his desk. Listicle number 3 said to tell your friends nice things, so Shoto tells him that this was good tactics. Then, the second, a green-haired boy who's Midoriya Izuku, or Deku, depending on whether you ask him or Bakugo, stumbles in with a grin just ahead of the teacher. The teacher, who's in a yellow sleeping bag and looks even more tired than Shinzo, looks around. If you're here to make friends, you can go ahead and leave. Problem. Shoto is here to make friends. Well, and become the number 1 with only his mother's eyes. Maybe Aizawa-sensei meant if they were here solely to make friends. Get in your gym uniforms and meet me outside. We're doing a test. The day after the press break-in, Shoto is standing at the front of the classroom as usual. Even though he may not be class president or even vice president, this is integral to his plan of making friends. Today, Kaminari is early. In his rush to be here before Aizawa, he seems to have left his brain-to-mouth filter at home, because he finally blurts, "Hey Todoroki, that's a wicked scar, how'd you get it?" Well, listicle number 13 said you need to be honest with your friends. Ooh, and telling him would absolutely undermine Endeavor's reputation. Shoto will have to warn Fumi, though. Thank goodness for that case in Hosu. Endeavor's been helping track down the escapee villain. And he said to be gone all week. Plenty of time for Fumi to get a warning. I got it from my mother pouring boiling water on my face after my father abused her into a mental breakdown. Dead silence in the classroom. Shota looks around. Did you want the long story? Shinzo picks up his head from the desk and raises his phone. Yes, please, the long story, and don't leave anything out. Shota kind of expected chaos today. With a field trip in All Might, chaos was bound to happen, and that was even discounting whatever his son was going to do. Hitoshi has a well-refined sense of chaos. He did not, however, expect chaos to happen before they even got to the bus. And yet, the classroom is in uproar. He opens the door and activates his quirk automatically. What is Bakugo, of all people, roars, "We need to fight trash fire!" There is not a single student in UA whose quirk or personality would lend themselves to a nickname like trash fire. The only fire quirk Shota can think of belongs to a shy, sweet little second year, and he's even had his coffee. The noise abates, and Toshi tosses Shota his phone. There's the story, Trash Fire's endeavor. Bakugo sneers, "Give me a day and I'll figure out a better name and teach you all to sign it." 10 minutes later, the USJ trip is cancelled in favor of a crash course on what to do when you suspect abuse. For the record, Hitoshi did good at getting the dramatic "why I don't use my fire" speech on camera, and Shota makes sure to tell him so. Kids in the foster system never get enough positive reinforcement, and Shota is looking to balance that out now that Hitoshi is his and Hisase's kid in all but name. Todoroki Shoto, looking vaguely confused at everything going on, is placed in mandatory counseling, and Recovery Girl is calling a contact of hers, who specializes in reversing old damage to see if they could do anything about his sight. Cementus has been pulled out of class to construct a temporary housing situation for Todoroki, Shoto, and possibly Fumi. As an afterthought, and since Hound Dog is already on the phone, Shoto recommends counseling for Bakugo as well. More anger management than abuse counseling, though. All Might apologizes to Todoroki at least 3 times before Shota pulls him aside and explains that it's not his fault that Endeavor took his jealousy too far. And right now, the best thing he can do is help Stonewall when Endeavor inevitably comes looking for his son. And rest up, Endeavor won't listen to All Might's secretary. Go take a nap. An hour later, at the USJ, the League of Villains steps into an empty foyer. 13. An hour later at the USJ, the League of Villains steps into an empty foyer. 13, having left when they were no longer needed. Shigaraki throws a fit, and Kurogiri warps them back before his tantrum can alert the heroes that UA was invaded. That's an asset they can't risk being burned permanently. He'll have to figure out why Eraserhead looks so familiar another time then. Izuku sits with Todoroki in Recovery Girl's office. They're waiting for the counselor. Recovery Girl's contact won't be awake for another hour. Todoroki is wearing his usual blank expression, twiddling his thumbs. Izuku can't take the silence anymore and blurts, "You know it's not his fire, right?" Todoroki turns to stare at him. "Come again?" "It's not his fire. It's yours. You're not him, and you will never be him. You are. You're going to get top marks in cooperation at least." Todoroki snorts. "I am making friends out of spite, Midoriya. I'm not that friendly." Something in Izuku's face must give away his confusion. Most likely all of it. He wears his heart on his sleeve. Todoroki elaborates. "He told me on the first day of school that I was here to suppress All Might, not to make friends. Of course, I looked up advice on how to make as many friends as possible." That explains a lot of Todoroki's odd habits if he's taking advice on making friends from the internet. But Izuku realizes they've gotten off track. Okay, but the effect is the same. You are not him, and you will never be. Because the only person who could ever be him is him. Very true, Midoriya-kun. Hound Dog steps through the door, and Izuku bites his tongue to keep him from going on a ramble. "Todoroki-kun, if you'll come with me, we'll work out a schedule for you to receive counseling. You need to call your siblings and warn them about your father." "Yes, thank you for the reminder." As Todoroki leaves, he starts texting. Izuku goes back to class, worrying about his friend. Because those listicles, as weird as their advice had been, Todoroki had felt the need to share his favorite color in food. Green and cold soba, by the way, worked, and Izuku considers him a real friend now. Nice. On Tuesday, Endeavor storms onto campus to find out what safety concerns mean when used as the reason Shoto hasn't been home. Looking out a fortuitously placed window, 5 of Aizawa's students giggle as they load up the balloon slingshot. The balloons, loaded up with Ishido's stickiest acid and all the glitter they could beg off Ayama, go flying with weak nitroglycerin power, and there is a roar from the ground. Aizawa, who absolutely should not be condoning this, barks, "He can calculate your position from your trajectory if you stay in one place too long. Move!" Toshinori, currently not using One for All, stares after them as they bolt for a new window and young Yaoyorozu takes their place. Shouldn't you be telling them to stop? And miss a perfect teaching opportunity? Yaoyorozu, look up the formula of itching powder and try to make it already in capsules. That would be illogical, Yagi. Look how much they're learning. Illogical, giggles the ventilation system. Oddly enough, there are 2 voices in there. Toshinori appears and meets the eyes of young Shinzo and young Jiro. What do you plan to do? We're gonna play Rick Astley's Never Gonna Give You Up on repeat, but keep changing the volume so you can't tune it out. A flicker in the lighting heralds Endeavor's rage at another volley of glitter slime balloons. Footsteps herald young Todoroki and young Midoriya. Todoroki has his phone and is rattling off a list of ingredients. Toshinori hears toilet paper, water, food coloring, sugar, before Midoriya skids to a stop. Yagi-san, have you seen Koda? Before he can answer, Todoroki shakes his head. No, we can't stick the poor birds on him. They get fried. Togata Mirio and his 2 friends turn the corner to stare at the chaos that is the courtyard. What is going on? Why is Endeavor in the courtyard? Todoroki shrugs. He's mad that UA is keeping me away from him after they learned about his abusing of me and my mom. Togata opens his mouth, closes it, and rolls on his heel. I'm going to call my year rep. 15 minutes later, word has spread, and the entirety of UA has declared open season on Endeavor. After an incident with a nest of hornets and an entire case's worth of wet, staining, sticky toilet paper balls, Endeavor flees without even having gotten to Nedzu's office. The teachers try half-heartedly to stop the chaos, but they know this may be Shoto's only chance at justice. Endeavor is a powerful man, and who knows when Todoroki Shoto will see justice. Who knows when Todoroki, Fumi, and Natsuo will be able to live without their father's shadow over them. Who knows when Todoroki, Toyo, and Rei will be avenged. Turns out, with the entire Yaoyorozu legal team on the case, who knows when turns out to be a day before the sports festival. The news breaks and Endeavor's merch stock tanks. A student as Shiketsu shouts, "I knew it!" in the middle of homeroom and is in absolute pain for the rest of the day. And Hosu, a man on a mission, sees a target most worthy of his time. He turns toward the Todoroki mansion, and Ingenium finds no trace of the hero killer. Near Sir Nide's agency, a man in the mask tells the purifier of the world that this is why quirks are evil. They will be going to watch the trial, and possibly exacting the justice that Rewind brings. The sports festival goes on, and the winners end up being Todoroki Shoto, followed by Bakugo Katsuki, followed by Izuku Midoriya, who would like to know that he broke no bones. None! With no drive for revenge, Ida Tenya interns at the Ida Ten agency and has a great time shadowing his brother. Of course, with no brother to take up a legacy for, he's still stumped as to a name. And he really does appreciate Todoroki's suggestions, but Speedy Boy is a little too memey for his tastes. In the final exam, Bakugo chokes out an apology to Izuku for how he has acted, prompted by his counseling sessions. Izuku accepts it easily, and they defeat All Might with teamwork. Then Bakugo gives him a friendly punch. Izuku freaks and judo flips him. Then they get into a scuffle. In between the mall trip and the training camp comes the trial. It's an open and shut case. A subpoena is excellent grounds for a trip outside the hospital sans Endeavor's approval, so Todoroki Rei is able to stand witness. Then there's Fumi and Natsuo's testimonies, then Shoto's. Then, just as they're about to wrap up, a window breaks and a young man with black hair and a small child jumps through. "Hi, is this the Endeavor trial? Also, this kid is mine now." Dabi, legal name Todoroki Toya, and if it weren't for Eraserhead's glare, the prosecution would be screaming, agrees to serve time for some minor shoplifting and arson if he gets to testify. Which he does while holding a little girl with white hair and a horn, who he insists her dad was definitely worse, so she's mine now. Go find an angry shithead with a beak mask and a serious case of hot foot. The little girl is extremely quiet, all wrapped up in Dabi's coat, so the judge just rolls with it. Even without Dabi's testimony, it would have been an open and shut case. Todoroki Enji is stripped of his heroic license and sentenced to prison for domestic abuse, child abuse, and lack of care for the citizens he claimed to protect. Then, to add insult to injury, as he's being transported to a suitable prison, a man in a red bandana mask wrecks the van and tries to stab him. Unfortunately for Stain, the heroes set to watch Endeavor are enough together to subdue the hero killer. Overall is arrested before his golden moment comes, and Shinzo Hitoshi, soon to be Aizawa Hitoshi, as soon as the paperwork goes through, gets a new little sister, Eri, who he'll die to protect. The Todoroki house is sold to a developer who specializes in lovely affordable housing, and Rei opens a ryokan, I don't know what that is, so if I pronounced it wrong, I'm sorry, with the profits. It's in the center of Fumi's preschool, Natsuo's medical school, UA, and Dabi's little place in Yusufu Ward. So all the ex-Todorokis can come to visit easily, and Dabi can even drag his new neighbor along to make friends. Midoriya, Inko, and Rei get along just like their sons. Inko talks and Rei listens, and rarely does this change. The training camp goes off without a hitch, since the League of Villains has no interest in trying to convert any of the students. Bakugo wasn't accidentally indicated to be villain material, and Tokoyami didn't get into the top 3. Everyone gets their hero licenses, except for Monoma, whose constant attempts to needle 1A tanked his cooperation score. All Might retires to a quiet life teaching and raising his son. Look, Midoriya Hisashi abandoned young Izuku. Obviously, the boy needs a father. In the words of Dabi, mine now. He's so proud of Izuku, especially when Sir Nidae admits you made the right choice. All for One's equipment fails one night. Gee, the tubes were melted. No one knows how that happened. It isn't like Dabi went undercover for a bit, and he dies quietly in his sleep. A death that he certainly didn't deserve, but the only death that he could have without massive collateral damage. Without a good leader, the League splinters and fades away. It doesn't help that Dabi is teaching the way of good citizen by day and undermining the system by night, which has the added benefit of people not looking twice at one because of villain status. Kurogiri goes back to his bar and makes an appointment with a memory specialist to figure out his fractured mind. Dabi himself gets out of prison in 10 months and sets about inciting a quiet rebellion. He may have joked that Eri was his kid now, but he's serious when he says that he will make a better world for her where quirks and looks don't define her. And she could do her teenage rebellion thing without being painted with the same brush as Overhaul. And yes, okay, the late bloomer Broccoli Kid, his brother won't stop talking about, deserves self-esteem. And yes, okay, the super hot number 1 had a terrible childhood at the hands of the commission, and no up-and-coming hero deserves that. But it's mostly for Eri, got it? And Dabi does not have a crush, no matter how good Hawks is with Eri. Mom! When Shoto gets back to school for his second year, the name he writes at the top of his review is not Todoroki. And with that burden off his shoulders, he feels like he could see his way forward clearly, obscured by neither smoke nor spite. He wants to help others in situations like his and Aries, so he expands his focus to apprehension and social work and starts planning how to get a social worker license. Thank goodness NG told him to not make friends. Who knows where he'd be otherwise. Boy bows back. The other boy bows back. Okay. A little alliteration going on there. At least interesting with all the automation. Shoto stays standing and greets everyone who comes in, along with the Can I just call her Momo? I mean, that's her name. That's not what's on the page, though. What? That's not a word. I'm gonna get a soundboard and just play it. Play that one specific. It's just gonna be a robot voice. Every time it comes out, I just press the button and. Okay. Shoto stays standing and greets everyone who comes in, along with Yayorozu. Yayorozu. Shinzo Hitoshi, the tiled. I got it from my mother, poiling. He turns toward the Todoroki mansion and Wrong hero. I could get through a paragraph. It's taking a while. And yes, okay, the late bloomer the late bloomer broccoli kid.